let's say, okay, I did hit it. You probably are getting the permission.
Right, I am.
We don't do a big intro. I just say thank you so much for coming, and I'm going to turn it over to Anne and to Dr. Dani for today's conversation.
All right. Thank you. My name is Anne Vernon-Gray, and I'm here on behalf of the Center for Undergraduate Research and Fellowships here with MindCORE. And this Behind the CV series is really sort of an on-the-nose name, because what we are trying to do is invite faculty to share the stories and the insight and the experiences they have that don't make it onto the CV, but are just as integral as part of their sort of becoming, so that we can have discussions that are a little bit more perhaps authentic, less intimidating with students, others who may be picturing themselves in an academic role, or just want to know how sort of people get from point A to point Z, and all the little things that go along in between. So with that, again, as Heather mentioned, we do try to have this be as relaxed as possible. There's absolutely no pressure to turn your cameras on, but it is meant to be a conversation. So it's helpful for our speaker to see friendly faces. So if you feel comfortable doing that, absolutely do. If you don't, please feel free to, at any point, put a question into the chat, or again, because we're a fairly intimate group, when Dr. Dani is done, we can you can just unmute yourself and speak out at any again, these things are recorded, and they do eventually make their way into a podcast that is called PhD Mystified, which I know is getting a lot of traction. I love to hear about students going back to listen to those things. So if you raise a question that you would like, we offered this to Dr. Dani, if there's a question that you would like edited out or to remain anonymous on that point, also do that. So please don't edit yourself now, because we can do that later. And without further ado, I will just say, Dr. Dani's here, known for many research aspects in neuroscience, particularly though with anything in relation to addiction. And while he may touch on that, and I'm hoping instead he will kick us off by giving us, he's always given us a little sneak peek about his upbringing, but maybe he'll start there and take us up to the present day.
Thanks very much. It's nice to be here. When I opened this morning, I had appointments today, so I looked at it and I thought, a description of how we got here, and it may be unfathomable to students of where I started. I mean, literally, this is not even a joke. It sounds like I'm making a joke. I started off in a little white wooden schoolhouse, rural schoolhouse, and somehow went from this town of 300 families to becoming the chairman of Neuroscience and director of the Mahoney Institute at the University of Pennsylvania. So in other words, to get you from there to there in a half hour, we have to get going, and we have to cover some ground, because it is kind of unfathomable, I think, on today's worldliness, the worldliness of young people, and the world exposures that we have, compared to the exposures I had growing up in the 60s, really. So let me back up a little bit and try to get you into this little wooden schoolhouse. It's no joke. My parents had me when they were kind of old. My sisters, I have two sisters who were quite a bit older than I. And I always said I was a miracle, and they always said it was an accident. And we still discuss that when we get together. We get together a lot. So my parents then, because they were getting older already. They moved from Ann Arbor, Ypsilanti area of Michigan, which is about 30, medium-sized towns about 30 miles west of Detroit, and we moved into very rural northern Michigan. And they built a home on a lake. Then there were no other homes around. You couldn't see another home from our home on this lake. And this a couple miles outside of a town of 300 families. And we moved there when I was 4. And I went to a school, this is no joke, it was a little white wooden schoolhouse where grades K through 12 were all in this one little wooden schoolhouse. And I had 4 boys in my class through most of my grade school and high school. And you have to realize this is the 60s. The internet, in the way that you understand it, didn't really even come into existence, even computers in the way you understand them, until the 90s. So you're completely isolated. My sisters were mostly gone by then. And so how in the world did this ever start? Well, I was thinking about this and I thought, well, what were the kind of quantum steps that got me going? And I think the first one was really the first book I can remember that I read and that I really remember. And it was when I was 8, and the book was called Galileo and the Magic Numbers. And in that book, the thing I really remember, whether it was in there or not, all these years later, what I really remember out of that book is that Galileo did experiments to understand his world. And you remember the ones who dropped the 2 balls in the Leaning Tower of Pisa. He did many other things, of course, and of course that went against the dogma that was established by Greek philosophers, mainly Aristotle, which was held as dogma by the church, unchanging dogma, and of course got Galileo into trouble. But even at 8, it made so much sense to me to do experiments and to define the world in that way. Then the next thing that happened, I think it was about the same time, I think it had to be 9 or younger when this happened, was I started watching a television show that was called The 21st Century. And all of you are too young to even have heard of this, but that television show, now remember, is happening in the 60s, about 30 years before the 21st century is going to happen, the century that we're in. And it was about science. It was about rockets and fiber optics and not supercomputers, but computers, and those kinds of things. And I loved the show. The show was great, and it was sponsored by big companies like DuPont and Union Carbide and so on. And when I was 9, and my sister would come home from college, and I talked her into writing a letter with me to those companies, asking them for a job. I wanted to have a job as a researcher in these companies because I really wanted to get out of this small town. and I was really anxious to get going, and I needed to get out of here. So let's get a job in this company. And so she helped me write this letter and sent it off. And I remember getting it back and reading it and being so disappointed I didn't get the job that I didn't save the letter. I just threw it away. But you can see I was already I had already made up my mind. First of all, I really needed to get going and get out of there. And I wanted to do research. And the other thing I had that I think that happened, because I was alone a lot out in the country, was I was really into sports, like hugely into sports, super focused, really, and it was fun. It was all I wanted to do. I just wanted to do sports. So on this lake, I'd get up in the morning as a kid and put on my bathing suit, put on my tennis shoes, tie my towel around my bicycle handlebars, slip my baseball glove on the handlebars, and I was ready for any sport. I had my tennis shoes on, I had my baseball glove, I had my towel, any sport that would pop up, I'm in the game, I'm ready to go. And I really had this intensity, this focus about sports. I'm bringing that up only because it's important for everything. I really had an intensity about this one thing that I really like doing. So here I am, 8 or 9, really completely naive about the world, completely isolated, naive, in this little school. And when I was a junior in high school, all the classes met in this one little room. It's called the study room. And some teacher just grabbed me one day when I was a junior in high school and said, come with me to the principal's office. And I went in there and I thought, who knows what's going on here? And they said, here, sit down at this desk and take this test. And they just plunked this test in front of me. And I said, what's this for? And they said, there's a summer program. Take this test. It's no big deal. I just took the test. And I don't know what that test was, but it was probably some kind of aptitude or IQ, or really don't know. Never got any feedback whatsoever, none at all of this test. But I was picked among 27 people from around the country to go to a summer program in physics and math that was taught by the professors from the University of Chicago. And it was in this little small university where we were all brought and went there, and the students were all really nice and everything. And it was really my first experience outside of this little town. It was the first time I'd ever really gone anywhere. You know, it's not like we weren't poor. I don't give you the impression that I'm coming from, oh, I had to struggle through great poverty. I didn't. It's a middle-class family, really nice house. My parents, when they came to the small town, put together a restaurant. And it was very successful. But I was completely naive. I mean, I just didn't know anything. And so I was aware enough as a junior in high school that, okay, this is a great opportunity to learn. Okay, that's fine. But what I've really got to do here is figure out, where am I? Like, where am I compared to other people? And I really was able to judge. These 27 people were really smart. They were pretty exceptional, but I didn't know that. I had no way to know that they were not just ordinary kids. So I went there and I went, wow, they're really smart, and they all work. You know, they don't just play sports all day. They really work. And so it kind of went click, I get it. And I already kind of got that when I leave, now when I graduate from high school and I go to college, I'm going to have to really work. And here's the thing that I think is different, how different my world is from your world. You have the internet and you're really exposed to the world. You're quite worldly. You really understand the world in a way that I was completely naive of. I had no exposure to the outside world. But in many respects, I was more independent. I really ran my life. I didn't ever have an advisor. I never had a mentor. My parents kind of made suggestions of where to go to college. I didn't pay any attention to it. I only applied to one school, like the University of Michigan. Went to University of Michigan, loved it, had a great experience, but didn't have a clue. And I went down there thinking, well, they're all going to be like these 27 people. And so I've got to really work. And the reason I brought up this intensity about sports is that I was able to take that and very consciously go, click, this is what I've got to do now. And the thing is, I really liked it. I mean, I had no exposures. I used to go to readings when the beat poets like Farrell Getty and Ginsberg, and I'd go sit in the libraries and listen to their readings. And this is like, oh, this is amazing to me. Listen to Norman Mailer reading these books, or when they came to campus. You don't understand how unexposed I was. I went to the first football game. Michigan Stadium at the time was the biggest in the country. It held 110,000 people. When I went to that game and I walked out of this tunnel, of course I arrived late, and walked out of this tunnel with my buddies, I was shell-shocked. I literally froze. They went to the seats and I just stood there with my mouth open. I had never seen that many people in my life. So, completely out of it. But I loved it. I just loved it. And I worked very, very hard in kind of a focused, warped way that I don't think the average person can do. But I just loved it. And I ended up doing very well. And so then I knew I wanted to do this research. And I also knew I couldn't fail. I couldn't go back to that small town, right? There's no safety net here. This has got to work. And so I worked really hard in that way. And also it was a time, a very different world. This was the Vietnam War. There's a great deal of rebellion. Even though I was very close to my parents, very close to my family, when I was 18, that was it. I just left. I didn't really take any money anymore. It was, just a different world. I mean, you couldn't do that now. I had scholarships and things like that that I competitively won, but was very independent. And I'm not saying that that's a good thing, and I wouldn't recommend it. Now, I think now is a very different world, but that's the way things were then. Kind of, you know, so I didn't realize there's anything to be worried about. So being that naive, I didn't have anything to worry about. I just did. So I did pretty well in school. And then when I was going to go to graduate school, I mean, I knew I wanted to go do research and kind of, you know, how the body works in biophysics. I was coming from a math and physics background. And I had never talked to any mentor. I had never talked to any advisor until it came time to go to graduate school. And I just took my CV and I plunked it on the desk of this place where you went to see an advisor. And it turned out this advisor was a professor in physiology at Michigan. He looked at my CV and said, "You should come to physiology at Michigan." And it is kind of what I wanted to do, of how the body works, and applying biophysics to it. And I said, "What are the 4 best schools?" And he told me, and I realized I had enough sense. I realized I couldn't stay in Ann Arbor, I couldn't stay in Michigan. I had so many friends. My friends we just had too much fun. It was too distracting. And I realized I had to work harder. I had to kind of go up another notch, and I couldn't do it with these people around. And so I knew I had to leave. And so I applied to the Hopkins, University of Minnesota, University of Washington, and UCLA. At that time, those were the best physiology departments in the country. The University of Minnesota was the first one to tell me that they would pay, and I had no money. So I just said yes. I didn't realize that all the other ones were going to say the same, they were going to give me money too. I didn't realize you got money while you were a student. I thought I was going to somehow have to figure out how to pay, just like I did as an undergraduate, which is, you know, scholarships and working in the summer. So I just took that and went to the University of Minnesota and had just a tremendous experience. Worked with Nate Lifson, who was the Lasker Award winner, National Academy member. You know, exceptional, and David Levitt, who was the editor of the Biophysical Journal. So I had a really, really great experience. And again, I worked very hard. And I think here's the trick. And I tell this kind of thing to my students. At the level you're at this point, you rarely differentiate yourself by being smart. You already know this, but I'll tell you, it's a bell-shaped curve, right? Being smart is a bell-shaped curve. There's less smart people, there's most everybody in the middle, and then there's the very smart people. But by the time you get here, you've moved this distribution so it's all over here. And so everybody's pretty darn smart. Even the least smart of the very smart. And so you can't differentiate yourself much that way. The thing I had was I liked it. And that's what I tell the students, find a way to be happy at work, to just enjoy it. Be kind of zen about different parts, just kind of go, this feels good. No tension, get into the process, not the result, just enjoy it. And fortunately, that came naturally for me because my whole life I had wanted to do research. So the idea of me doing these very warped things, like I lived literally right smack dab across the street from my lab, in a real hole, real awful apartment. My apartment's so bad. I could tell you so many funny stories, but one day I came in and closed the door to my apartment and the ceiling fell in. I mean, that's how bad this place was. So a little efficiency apartment. But I literally could get up and be at work in 5 minutes. I could go home and eat something and come back. And so it was very easy for me to work really long hours. And there's a big advantage. There's another, in this vector space of people, another vector space is how much are you at work and enjoying work, and how efficient are you at work? And it's another normal distribution, right? Whereas being smart, there's no room to get an advantage. But work, even the smartest person might not work very hard. And so if you're over here, you're way at the other end of the distribution, just because it's fun and you don't want to be anywhere else, and you're there 80 hours a week, you just get a big advantage. And I think that's how I ended up here. It was always so much fun for me. I had a lot of fun with my friends, but if my friends were coming to get me to go to a party, they came to the lab to get me. And at the end of the night at 2 a.m, after we'd been partying for however knows how long, they dropped me off at the lab because that's where I was going. That's where I wanted to be. And as warped as this sounds, I got married very late, in my 40s, and my daughter when I was 48, like my parents. I was pretty old. And my wife's a professor here as well. And she's from Italy, and my in-laws are from Italy. We'd go there and she'd go there. And when she'd be off giving talks or going to Italy, before my daughter was born, I just stayed in my office. I just slept in my office. I just worked. So when I say I did 80-hour weeks, I'm exaggerating. I did something like 100-hour weeks. I was in my office all the time. I never went home because I loved it there. So that's the thing I asked you to cultivate, is just find enjoyment in it. And that was my thing. So if you wonder how I got from this little wooden schoolhouse where we just played sports, it's because it never was work. I never felt like, oh my God, I gotta go to work, I'm tired. I never ever felt that. And so I was able to put in really long hours, and it's serendipity, but I don't call it luck, because, if you're there at work and something fortuitous happens, you're just there. If you're not there, that fortuitous thing didn't happen. And so I'd say the biggest thing to cultivate is pleasure, so that it doesn't feel like you have to work. You don't have to push yourself to work. And I think then you can do really well. And, one thing after the other things went well. I don't think it was luck. I just think it was work. But it never felt like work to me. And so I went from graduate school. I went and did a postdoc at University of Washington with Bill Hilla. I was a National Academy member. Kind of wrote the book on biophysics of electrical excitability. Won a Lasker Award with Clay Armstrong here at Penn. They won a Lasker Award, which defined how electrical activity in the brain takes place. And then I got a job at Yale. And things were looser there. I was on my way to Yale. I stopped at UCLA and I had so much fun at UCLA. I stayed there for 2.5 years. He called up and said, I'm coming to Yale. And I said, are you still coming? You're coming. And I went to, it was so much looser back then, and took my job at Yale. And from there, I went to Baylor College of Medicine. And it was just all very enjoyable to me. I think there is more stress in the system right now, but I think if you do well and really find a way to find pleasure in it and keep your eyes open and ears open, the world is not that, it isn't really harder now than it was then. It's different. And there are many more avenues than there were back then. There's really only one path back then. There are many avenues to capitalize on good education from an outstanding place like this. There are many different ways for you to go, such as in journals, in industry, in business, in writing, as well as the academic track that many of you see. I don't know how long that took. Did I get me to Pennsylvania in about a half hour? That's about it. For me, it was really fun. I absolutely just loved it. And I still kind of plow into things. Oh my gosh, I never thought that. And I'm still shocked. I still have a little touch of being 18 years where I got exposed to nothing, leaves a blank spot where I still found the things I really like. So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you for sharing that that journey. Does anybody have a question?
And I know it probably doesn't map onto anybody's life at all, I can imagine.
Well, it's interesting you should say that, because I too grew up in a rural area in Arkansas, and I feel like I have a real connection to that idea of lack of structure and familial pressure or expectations. And I think you're right. I don't know that really happens as much anymore. I feel like parents are much more involved in their children's lives from sort of beginning to end. And you mentioned, you don't think that's a bad thing, but just generally speaking, what advice do you have for people who are having trouble? I mean, I always hated that word, like, find your passion, right? I really like the way you like find something that's fun, or find something that you feel intensely about, or find something because I don't know that I have found a passion, but I know how I like to spend my time. But I don't know that everybody feels the same level of commitment or absorption that you do. Do you think that's absolutely necessary, or do you think it's just you need to work, like running away from a lion, you just need to be faster than the guy next to you?
That's the other thing. You'd think, well, maybe coming from sports, you were really, really competitive. I really wasn't. I really didn't ever think about the other person that much, other than that we were friends. So my feeling is, you're doing this, right? So for instance, let me take a student I had of mine who was my student not real long ago, but before I came to Penn. And one of my more recent students, right before I came to Penn, I've only been at Penn 7 years. And he lost his significant other, and he was kind of crushed by it. And he was going to drop out of graduate school and go get a job. He said, I just can't take it. I just don't want to do it. And I said, no, take some time off. I said, you don't have to sign anything or do anything. Just leave, go do what you want to do. Take 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months. By 6 months, get back in touch with me. If it gets to 6 months, get back in touch with me so I know what the heck's going on. But just don't take it off, because let's put it this way, you're going to go get a job, right? But you're getting paid to be a graduate student. You actually get money. You know when I got paid to be a graduate student? I won an award. The average student got paid $5,000 a year. I won an award. I can't remember what that award was called anymore, but I won some achievement award. And I was paid $3,500 a year because I won this award. I said, wait a minute, I'm getting paid $1,500 less, and I won this award. And they said, yeah. And I didn't realize it, but they were trying to get me to get the other $1,500. I had to teach the nursing students, which of course you can imagine every young guy wanted to teach the nursing students, but I didn't want to be bullied into doing it, so I wouldn't do it. But in any case, they get paid. So I said to them, you're getting paid to be a student. So to just take this as your job, just make believe this is your job, take your pay, come in here when you want to, but for as long as you want to take some time off. And he did, and he got himself back together and came back, and he started treating school as a job. I said, come in 9 to 5 and take an hour lunch. Treat it exactly like you would a job, and you're getting paid. You're not going to get paid way more for any job you get right now anyway. And so that's what he did. He got his PhD, and the idea was, you got your PhD, go do whatever the heck you want, but now you have a PhD. Your ceiling is just higher. There's nothing wrong with being educated, even if you want to go be an Uber driver. There's nothing wrong with being an Uber driver that's got a PhD and is smart. So look at it that way. There's no failure here. You can you're doing it anyway. why not enjoy it? Instead of being stressed about the future's going to hold, just enjoy it and get some pleasure out of it. And something's going to come afterwards, and it's going to kind of depend on you. But if you're feeling kind of crushed or kind of, I can't go on, there's a way to step back from it and still have pleasure in this. You don't have to be, I was really intense. It wasn't like I practiced to become intense. It was just there. But I think you can still find as much fun in this as you want. You can find as much fun as possible. And I think that that's a huge advantage. If you're really enjoying aspects, and you don't have to enjoy it all, but let's say you can enjoy 3 hours a day of being at work. That's 3 hours you weren't at work. That's 3 hours you were just having fun. So those other 6 hours that you put in, okay, so you worked 6 hours today. How bad was that? 6 hours, you can do that. You know, that's how I see it.
That's an interesting, it's a helpful view, I think, too. Because I mean, I've had a number of different jobs in different places, and there's no job that's 8 hours of fun. Anyway, but 3 hours is pretty good.
Yeah, 3 hours. You can get 3 hours out of it.
I wanted to say, it's just for some of the other attendees that are here for the first time. One theme that does come up is sport. Is that for some of our other speakers is that sports can sometimes be this focus, and it so seems to be a really good way that young people sometimes get to be really accountable for their own sort of schedules, because a lot of sports would require people to sort of train on their own or get up early and get places. And those are things that they were normally driven internally. And so that shift from sports to academia has been kind of interesting to me, because I think I always kind of discredit it. You know, it was if you were a sport. Yeah.
I get it. I certainly wasn't studying much in high school, but I don't think you can get away with that now the way I did back then.
Yeah.
I mean, I really do think you have to pay more attention to academics now than you did in the 60s. I remember how long ago this was, right? It's just in the 60s. I mean,
Applying to one school is not that unusual either. Katie Schuler had the same. She grew up in a really rural area, and also the taking the first offer. So the one thing that we hope that we can get to, at least tell people, don't take your first offer. You do get paid for PhD programs and apply to more than one school. I'm interested in, because you've made this career now, and one of the things that seems so challenging about rising through the ranks of an institution now is that you have to be an expert in so many things. You know, you have to be good at managing people, you have to be good at managing data, you need to be good at managing the research process, and then the bureaucracy. What parts of that do you enjoy now? And are you able to sort of get rid of some of the things that you don't, or?
Well, you know, it's so interesting that you say that. In 2000, 99, 2000, I went on a sabbatical. And this is before I really had major administrative duties. I was an associate professor. Was I a professor? I don't remember. I can't remember. But anyway, I was kind of like an associate professor, let's say. And I went on a sabbatical. And I went to MIT, and I didn't tell anyone in Boston I was there. I didn't tell anyone I was going, because I really wanted to just be back in the lab. And I started being back in the lab like full time. So I still love most, and I don't do it really at all anymore, is doing research in the lab. I mean, my job now is, which is really a lot of administrative, either running the lab or writing grants or editing and helping to write papers. I have to say that my team, I used to write all our papers, but now my lab members were outstanding and good, do most of the first drafts, do all the first drafts and much of the writing I edit. But, you know, and then I'm running the Department of Neuroscience. If you want to say that I'm running it. You know, I'm the chairman of the Department of Neuroscience. I went so far as to say I'm running it, but I am the chairman, and I am the director of the center. So I have a lot of administrative duties. I can't actually say I overtly love all those things compared to research. the research is what I love. And going on that sabbatical in 99, 2000 at MIT with, I still look back at that kind of when I was working all day just in the lab, just doing experiments. I just love that. It's what I wanted to do when I was 9. I mean, no one when they're 9 says, geez, I want to be an administrator. I want to be, they might say, I want to go to research, but they don't say, oh, 9, I can't wait to go be an administrator. So, I do like my job. I feel I get satisfaction out of it. I like when I can help members of my department or people in the institute, if I can get things going. But flat out enjoy. I love seeing people in the lab show me their stuff and how it's going. And we have ideas together and we do it. And it wasn't that long ago when I was in the lab myself. And most of my, geez, how many years is this? I don't know, let's say 30, just because I use 30 for everything. So let me just say 30 years that I've been doing this. 20 of those I was intensely in the lab. It's mainly been only this last 7 years when I've been more of an onlooker. But I love the research. I love the lab.
I have a question for you, John.
Dan.
Sorry,
Hey, Dan. Put your picture on, man.
It's I'm in lab and it's looking like very weird, but hello. I don't know why it's acting like that. But anyways, I've heard you speak about focus and hard work before, and it sounds like you're almost getting into a flow state during the research, which makes perfect sense. I'm curious how you rate your ability to switch off fully and not think about science and all, and has that changed over time during grad school versus now?
Oh man, it has for sure changed. It has for sure changed. I'd say the big change for me came when my daughter was born when I was 48. Dan's in my lab. He's a friend, and he knows Marielle, my wife. And we worked 7 days a week. And Marielle and I worked. My wife was also a professor. We worked 7 days a week. But when my daughter was born, actually we were at Baylor College of Medicine, and we still used to go into work and put a refrigerator box in my office with toys and soft stuff in it, and dump our daughter in there and keep the door open, and I'd work, and then we'd go in there and play, and we'd go back up in the lab and work, and she was in this big refrigerator box, which was like her playpen in my office. But I'd taken the futon out and put the refrigerator box in there. And but at some point, lawyers got involved, and we didn't want kids coming into the school anymore, doggone lawyers. And so that was the first time I started conducting things like probably like a normal human, where on weekends we didn't go in and we did stuff with my daughter and went to the zoo. And so for me turning off, Dan, I really didn't take much time off when I was young. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't. You actually hear me say this all the time. People should decompress. They should take time off. I really didn't need to because I was having fun. I didn't feel like it was work. So I didn't take much time off. But as I got older, now that I have Julia, I can turn off. But I have to say, now in the positions I have, I'm doing emails at midnight. And that doesn't matter if I'm here or if I'm in Venice or Rome, or doesn't matter. I'm doing emails till midnight is pretty standard for me. So I actually find I feel a little bit more tension now, because not all of this is fun. So I might be able to extract my 3 hours, but not all of this is fun. So I do feel a little bit more like, I'm burning out here. A little bit. Especially since we can't go anywhere. But I didn't have a huge problem turning off because I didn't really turn it off. I was the sort of guy who I'd throw my papers in. When I went on a trip, I'd throw papers into my bag and I'd read papers at night. And And it wasn't like that hurt. That didn't hurt. It was like I wanted to read the papers at night. And so it even helped me fall asleep. As a matter of fact, it's a great way to fall asleep. Pick up a science paper. You'll be out in about 15 minutes. That's how it works for me now, especially. So I didn't have that problem, Dan, but I do think the pressures are a little different, particularly with this pandemic. And that, this office, I get up in the morning, I walk right to here. It's the first thing I do. And, I'm in and out of this thing all day long. And when I'm not, I'm on the internet doing emails. So I get that there's really a lot of stress that people are under.
I have a question. Hello, nice to meet you, John. Thank you for recounting your life experiences and your journey to being a scientist. I was wondering, do you ever feel like you express yourself artistically with science? And if so, in which ways do you feel like you express yourself artistically?
I really understand what you're saying. I completely understand where you're coming from at that point of view, the idea of the creativity, because there's a great deal of creativity in science, and there's aspects of it that really do feel like you're approaching it more like an art than you are like something that's a list of things to do. So in that way, the other way you can have that feeling is right. The first papers I wrote when I started my own lab, I was single author papers, work that I had started as a postdoc, and I finished in my lab. And they were single author papers, and I had to really sit down and teach myself how I wanted to write and how I wanted to communicate. And I think there's an art to that too. There's an art to science writing as opposed to other kinds of writing. So I think that the artistic end of it, I think, is really the creativity, the way that you can bounce things back and forth, which I love. And you have really good people in your lab, as I've been really lucky through the. You want to talk about what? Maybe the one aspect. To tell the truth, that's the I had really good people in my lab, and I do now too. And I think that the creative energy is maybe one of the more artistic aspects of the science for me. There used to be, Mel, there also used to be, and this is different, it can be creative for you too, is the way you make figures. I mean, it was really important to make, at one time you had to draw figures, perhaps, or articulate what you wanted drawn. I mean, that's not the case anymore. But I remember I did a Trends in Neuroscience article in which we were studying the shape of ion channels. And there was a big controversy going on at the time. There were two really, I was really young, I don't know how old, I was like 30. And there were two really big name guys. And I don't know if they were both National Academy members, but at least one of them was. And they disagreed and really were at loggerheads. And I was writing a review on that, Trends in Neuroscience. I remember making a picture based on my data, which made their two pieces of data fit together a little bit. That is, their data didn't make either of them wrong. It just fit with this picture. And I remember working over and over again with this artist. And that really felt like a creative, artistic event too. It's different from now where it's all done with computers. We were literally standing there and she was drawing. And I was saying, no, a little bit more like this, a little bit more like that. So I think particularly if you really get into the creative processes in any way, it can really feel like art. You know what? If you're into art, somehow bring it to work. Make that part of the pleasure of doing this. Find a way that it's with you, so that again, you get 3 of those hours that are free.
I really appreciate that connection too. And I think that connects to something else you were talking about earlier that I wanted to bring back up, because I do fundamentally believe research is at base a creative process. It might not be art per se, but I think it's a creative process. And you said that, right, that you need to enjoy the process rather than the outcome. Can you talk about that a little bit more, just sort of pick it apart a little bit? And for people now, you know, talk about finding the ability to do that, right? So not to, you know, as an undergrad, not be pressured to publish, as a graduate student, how to handle the pressure to publish. Like, how do you stay focused and grounded in the process with all external?
Yeah, I know what you're asking. I was lucky in that I mentioned some of the people I trained with. I really probably got this just infused in me from Dave Levitt, Nicholas, and Bertha. These people I trained with were so much integrity that science is a process. And another person who used to say this was Jim Patrick, who was really the chairman that I based my own behavior as a chairman on. He was a very good chairman. That is, science isn't the end point. The science part is the process. If you get kind of into the process and then just be relaxed about the process, you do end up at the end point. But if you're just gunning for this end point, a great deal of pressure on you, oh man, does that take the fun out of it? And we've all experienced that, right? We've got our reviews back from the paper. We've got 2 months to turn this paper around. No competitors are closing in on us. And you just go nuts trying to get this paper out. We've all done it. And that can even be fun too. If you let it be fun and kind of exciting, then it is. But in general, I think you just have to step back and kind of be a little zen about it. The one thing I remember is early in my career, we did a lot of things with tissue culture. And I don't think you can even do this now. We used to have a flame in the hood, which is now illegal. And we used to have alcohol in the hood. That's all illegal. But back then, there used to be this alcohol in this flame. And that used to be, when I had to do that kind of work, it was so relaxing. You just smell the alcohol, this warm flame, and working on the tissue. There's no rushing it. You have to be careful not to get things dirty. And just relax a little. And just, and I would consciously say, okay, just relax, because if you go fast, you can contaminate this stuff. And just cool down. And I think if you can do that with your work, just kind of go, what's the process? And go see your advisor. You know, whoever your mentor is, if you get along with him or her. I don't know if it's a little bit of a problem, but I hope that isn't the case for anyone. But if you have ideas, if there's things that are occurring to you, go talk to them, because setting up this conversation, or if you have really good postdocs in the lab, go talk to them. And that slows down the process too. It makes the process become a process rather than, I really need this goal and I'm going to crack if I don't get it by next Tuesday. So I think it's just, it may have to be a little bit conscious. You may have to consciously say, I'm going to just enjoy the process. I'm just going to do the process of science. And if you do good science over and over again, you're going to be successful.
I guess I have a sort of a follow-up for that, unless anybody else wants to jump in. Which is, you know, you said at some point, like, you were sort of did everything on your own. You didn't have a mentor. And I'm curious, I want to actually maybe call you out on that a little bit. Did you not have any mentors that you talked to, or did you just not recognize them as such at the time?
I can tell you, until 18, I didn't have a mentor. There's no way. There's no way. I had a very, I have to say that I had a disadvantage. I had a very close family, and I was very, very close with my father, mostly playing sports by the way. I'm not surprised, that's what I did. But I was very, very close with him. And in retrospect, I have a lot of life lessons that I got from him, even when he was in his 90s. But in terms of mentors, when I went to graduate school, and I got to graduate school, I had a really, really very close relationship. We were very, very close. So I recommend that you talk to your advisors. You know, you can set up a relationship where you discuss your work with them. I think it's that's a good thing. I had really very, very positive relationships. That, you know, they weren't telling me where to go with my career. We talked science a lot. You know,
Well, I feel like I had a very enlightening and insightful last hour, and I am conscious of the time. I want to make sure that everybody is able to go, you know, at 4. But I do also just want to say thank you for your time and for sharing with us. And if anybody has one more question, we probably can squeeze it in. All right. Well, once again, thanks everybody for coming. We have one more in March, the last February of, the last February of March, the last Thursday of March. And then I can't remember if we have another one in April. We have 2 more, one in March and one in April. And we hope we will see you there. And I hope.
Let me just see who's next. Michelle might remember, or we might know. It might be Ishmael from.
Ishmael is next, and Ishmael Abdus-Sabor, and then
Roy
Hamilton.
And then Roy, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thank you again, Dr. Dani, for your time.
sure.
Yes. Thank you
Yeah.
very much. Hope it was less painful than the NIH reviews.
Oh my gosh, no problem, nothing.
Yeah. All right. Thank you
All right.
for joining us.
Bye, everybody.